What's going on, guys? This is Paul with 12 Volt Review, and sorry you can't see my face, my beautiful face and all that, but anyway, I got some other stuff to talk about. It's more like an install tip. Today we're going to be talking about harnesses. There's so many different styles and types of harnesses. Every vehicle has their own special harness. Older vehicles from like 85 and older, they may have a harness, but usually those don't have any plugs to go in, so you just have to cut them off. But all newer harnesses nowadays have cars have harnesses made for you. So when you go to replace your radio, you have a harness that easily wire up to the new radio and just plug right on in. Not all harnesses are the same. Like I said, every car has its own different plug-in and style of how the radio works with the car. From 2000 and down, most all cars, when you turn the key on, the key itself supplies 12 volts to the radio. But in newer models, from 2000 on up, certain ones, of course, the newer the cars are, most likely you're going to have it, everything is computerized now. So when you turn the key on, it wakes up the brain of the car, and the brain tells the radio to turn on. And that's all computerized signals. There's no more switch power and stuff like that. And I'm going to go over some different harnesses to kind of show you basically what I'm talking about. I got right here, this one right here. This is just a basic. This is actually a Mazda harness. And all it does is when you pull your factory radio out, you have to unplug some plugs at the back of it, and this harness right here will plug into that plug. And all you have to do is when you get a new radio is wire color to color, which I'll actually show you that here in a second too. The wires from the new radio to the harness that you purchase, usually like $10–15, together, and then everything else just plugs in after that. They used to make a harness that had the plug in one end and the harness end on the other end, but there's so many different styles of harnesses. You almost have to have another room just to carry all the inventory you would have to have in order to keep every car, have a harness for every car for every radio, because not all radios use the same plug. So you have to have, one car may have 15 different harnesses just for all the radios, and then it just goes on from there. So anyway, this is just, like I said, it's just a basic harness. You got all your basic wires, got your speaker wires, you got the red switch power, turn on, you get your constant, and some of them have grounds, some of them don't. Like some older Nissans don't have a ground in the harness, and if you wire it up and you got the radio in your hand, then the radio won't power up. That's because the radio, when you fit it back in the dash and screw it back in, then it grounds the radio for it to come on. So if you're like, well, this harness ain't any good, or the radio's bad, if you have an older Nissan, like a 90 model or something like that, screw the radio back in the dash using the screws with it, and it'll ground the radio and it should come on in. Some Dodges, 90 models, the ground wire is not in the plugs. It's actually its own little braided wire plugged in behind the radio, or an old black wire. Anyway, this, like I said, this is just a basic, 2000. Actually, the Mazda don't have any data harnesses, so it's pretty much just a harness like this. Now this harness, set this off to the side. These are the harnesses I was telling you about. This is a Class 2 data bus harness for GM Chevy vehicles from like 2000 on up to 2007. So some are newer, depending on the vehicle. But like Chevy trucks, they started in 2003, required this harness. And all it is, there's a box here, and there's all your wires are inside this little package here that plug into the main harness. In fact, I'll go ahead and take it out of the package so you can take a look at it. And in fact, I'll just leave it. I got a double-sided tape to the packaging, so I'm going to leave it on the packaging. So this is your harness right here, and then what this does is just plugs back into your vehicle. And what it is, see this little purple wire right here in the harness that plugs in, it goes in the box. This is your data wire, and this is what turns on the factory radio. And what it does is this little box takes the data from this wire and turns on a red wire, because there's no switch power behind those vehicles. Also, there's your airbag lights, door chimes, dome lights. I think a couple other features all loop to your factory radio. And if you try to bypass this, you'll lose your door chimes, you'll lose airbag lights, you'll lose another feature, you'll lose switch power, you'll lose accessory power, and also because of that, you may actually start running into errors popping up on your dash, like check engine lights and stuff. Even though it has nothing to do with your engine. This is basically just a harness like this, because it has all your speaker wires. Even though the RCA's on this one, you can actually take these and cut them off, and you got your speaker wires going into it. You can actually, I don't know if you can tell, but there you got your positive, negative going in the RCA. You just cut them off, strip them down, and connect them that way. And but this has all the same wires as this does, but there's an extra computer box that goes along with this, or Class 2 data bus. There's Class 2 data buses, your GM land buses. There's also a CAN bus for Chrysler, Fords, and I think Volkswagens, or some of your European vehicles. And like I said, this is just one of probably like 50 different harnesses of like this for the newer vehicles out there. So you might want to make sure you get the right one. These are a little costly. This harness right here will be around $100 something, or $100, $110, and it may be worth it to purchase the harness, have it done right, be done real fast. Then sometime later on, have to take your truck or car to the mechanic for them to clear codes and an airbag. The airbag light doesn't come on, and it also may interfere with the actual airbag system itself. So I wouldn't take the chance of your airbags not coming out just because you wanted to bypass all this right here, not wanting to pay the $100. So if you're installing this, I'd suggest getting the correct harness for your vehicle. So anyway, that's this harness. We'll set this off to the side. In most of my videos, I've talked about steering wheel control modules. This is a steering wheel control module made by Pack Audio. It's the SWI-RC, and what it does, it works with Alpine, Clarion, Advent Radios, Jensen, Dual, Kenwood, Pioneer, Sony. It works with like almost all the major radios out there. It has all the wiring and the instructions you need, but if you're going to purchase this, it wouldn't hurt to go to the Pack Audio website, look up this module, and look for vehicle-specific instructions. That way you can print out instructions on how to wire this for your vehicle. If you get this to try to run the instructions in here, you can still do it, but it's a little more complicated. So that's why they made the vehicle-specific instructions. This module is going to run around $70 to $90, and it'll keep your steering wheel controls, your volume, seat, whatever your steering wheel has that controls the radio. It'll keep those working. You have to make sure that the radio that you purchase is able to control steering wheel controls. If you buy a cheap $80 or $50 radio, it may not have steering wheel control functions or the ability for steering wheel controls or wired remotes. So you have to purchase the right radio, get this, program it to the car, wire it to the radio, and then you can still use your steering wheel controls if your car has them. And that's what they do. That's what I've always been talking about on certain radios that had the wired remote functions. This harness right here retains like OnStar, and Bose probably, and all kinds of features. It's for navigation radio, retains warning chimes, retains steering controls. This box right here has this harness and the steering control built into one unit. These units usually run around $200 to $230, and it's one box, and it's all pre-programmed. You don't have to worry about finding what's wired. You don't have to worry about programming. You don't have to worry about wiring extra steering wheel control wires up, because it's got a lot of wires. It's all pre-done for you. The only time if you ever need to reprogram is if you want the buttons on your steering wheel to do something different. Anyway, this is for like newer GM vehicles, but they do make some for Ford, Chrysler, other vehicles like that. You just have to. You can always go to packaudio.com or pack-audio.com, or your favorite kit harness website, and they can tell you which harness you need. Um, it's always good to get the right harness for your vehicle. That way, when it'll save hours of time of if you take the radio out, unplug it, and you cut all those wires off, especially with the data, all the data stuff, you can end up damaging the brain of the vehicle. You can also short out some fuses, and also the colors on the factory harnesses do not match the colors that come with the radio harness that you are fixing to install. So you have to figure all those out, get online and search, and a lot of times they don't give you the correct answers. If you use a harness, spend that little extra money, whether it be $15 or $230, you know you're getting the right stuff. It's going to be done right, and you won't have any problems later on. That's all I have to say about that. There's actually a second part to this video. I'm going to put these off to the side. And, as I stated earlier in a previous video about getting the right crimpers and stuff like that, to make sure you have the right tools. If you buy cheap tools, you have a cheap installation. Now there are several different ways to connect harnesses together. Connect the wires. So some people like to solder wires. That's great. Actually, soldering is actually probably the best possible connection you can have. But it's lengthy, and you could possibly have the chance of actually, burning holes in the seats. If you're sitting in the car, wiring everything up. It causes smoke, which may be hazardous to your health. I'm not sure. I do a lot of soldering myself. And there's also people that like to use tape. They just strip the wires, twist them together, wrap it in tape. That's actually the worst ever. Because in the summer it gets really hot inside your dash. That tape's gonna start unraveling and eventually just fall off the connections. And if you got power, like on this yellow wire, and the tape falls off it and it touches the ground, it's gonna short something out. It could burn the radio up, should blow fuses, could actually catch a fire in the vehicle. So only use tape if you really need to. Also, connectors. Move this out the way here. I suggest using crimpers. Some good ones. Like say, if you buy those little $5 cheapies from the dollar store, they're probably not going to do very well. So I suggest at least going and getting some Kleins. That makes it really nice. So they look just like these. They have a red handle and it says Klein down the side of them. They're about $25 crimpers. These, I've actually got these from Walmart. They're about $9. I mean, they're still cheaper, and they do have little problems like this one. The little bolt that holds the things together gets loose sometimes, but I think it's just this one set. But they're comfortable. They have a good grip, and then they can actually have good crimping connectors as a front cutter, middle stripper, which are extremely sharp. If you stick your finger in there and squeeze, your finger's going to be coming off. Because I almost did it once. I was stripping some wire, my finger got caught in here, and I had little dots where these went into my finger. So these are really sharp, and they can strip really well. Another thing to have handy is wire ties, cable ties, twisty, whatever you want to call it. These help neaten up your installation afterwards. And also we got butt connectors. Since you have crimpers, you have to have connectors to connect your wire. And they come in all different sizes, shapes, forms, colors, everything. And what you need to do is I got a red one, and they're rolling all over the place. A blue one, and a yellow one. Red's usually the smallest, like 22 to 16 gauge. Blues from, like 14 to 10 gauge or whatever, and this is our 18 gauge. And yellows for like bigger, like 10 gauge wire and stuff. Always get the right size connectors for your wire. If you get a wire where you can stick the wire almost all the way through the connector, but the installation is still on, the connector is too big. The blue connectors, usually this size wire, whether it be from a radio, for the harness, they're usually all the same size. You can use blue butt connectors on them, but they will still work. But in order to get the best connection possible, I suggest going down to the pink or red butt connectors. They don't make butt connectors any smaller. If you can't push it in with the installation, then it's probably the right size butt connector. So if you're wiring up harnesses, whether it be this harness or the $200 harnesses, the red butt connectors are the best size that you could use. Now, that's what I'm saying, always use the right butt connectors. Now when you buy a harness, usually, depending on the company, these wires are already pre-cut about the right length down on the wire. So you just pull the insulation off and you got just the right length of wire that's been stripped. So what you need to do is go ahead and undo all the connections, all the little ends here. It will make a little mess, but it's easy to clean up later. I'll pull them like 2 or 3 off at a time here. Alright, I got all the connections here. A lot of times there's going to be some extra wires on these harnesses, like I know on the 5800, which is a Ford harness. It's a big gray plug. The harnesses that Best Kit makes, there's a bunch of brown wires in the center. Those don't do anything. So you can just cut those off, not to worry about them. A lot of times when you're installing radios, there's an orange wire, or several orange wires, like on let's see, this one don't have it. But that's for illumination. Usually the radios nowadays come with their own dimmer or brightness you can actually turn up and down, so you really don't need to use those wires. And what you do is you take whatever harness first. Usually the harness that you get for the car is easier to work with first, because a lot of times, as you can see on this one, the power and ground are longer than the rest of the wires, so I'll have to modify those here in a second. So what you want to do is take your connectors, give your little ends of wire a twist, slide them in all the way down, and then give it a good crimp. It's not coming off. And then go on to the next wire. That way, when you stick all these connectors on, they're all nice and tight. Excuse me. And you don't have to worry about things coming apart. Also, I noticed on some cars or harnesses, they have multiple blue wires. Usually it's just a wire, there's a solid blue wire, and it's also a wire with a blue stripe going on the length of it, and a blue wire. Or just a blue wire with a white stripe. If you have those, go ahead and take both of those on the vehicle harness, not this harness. Go ahead and take those and connect them together. What those do, of course this only has one, what those do is those either turn on factory amplifiers if your car has it, and also it's also for power antennas if your car has it. If your car has neither one of those and you still connect all the blue wires, it's not going to hurt anything, because all you're doing, just like the factory radio would have done, was supply power down those wires. And so if you have all the blue wires on this harness, or whatever harness you have, go ahead and connect them together. You won't hurt anything to do so. That way, if there's something that needs to be turned on that the factory radio did, the new radio will automatically turn it on, whether you know it's there or not. Usually wiring up a harness and doing it the right way probably takes about 5 minutes. Of course, I'm jabbing my jaws here, so it's probably taking a little longer. I'm having to think of stuff. But anyway, I'm almost done. I got like 2 more. And you gotta always, every time you do a connection, always do a little tug on it. It's just to make sure, just in case. It's a bad crimp. You don't want to get all the way through it. All of a sudden, the butt connector falls off a wire, and you're like, oh. Then you got to go back and strip it and cut the other wire, and then the length and shorten it. It'll be all messed up after that. Okay, now I have all these with butt connectors on them. They're all basically the same length. And I'll set this off the side now. Of course, this is a Kenwood harness, but you know, some wires are shorter than others, and some are longer. All you got to do is just take and cut off, make the power and ground wires the same length as your speaker wires. You want all your wires to be the same length. I'll tell you the reason why in here in just a second. And on your radio that you put in, there should be a blue wire with a white stripe and or another blue wire. Get the blue wire with the white stripe. Actually, here's the other blue wire right here. It's just solid blue. Don't even worry about this one. Because if you hook up the solid blue wire, it says for antenna control, and if you have a blue wire with a white stripe, if you hook up just this one, when you go from radio to CD, you can lose your sound if your car has factory amplifiers. And then because what it does is this only energizes when an FM is turned on, or the radio is turned on the radio. So you listen to radio stations, then this wire is energized, and then if your car has an antenna, it'll go up. But as soon as you switch over to CD, USB, or whatever other feature, this wire becomes de-energized. Because you hooked all the blue wires on this harness, you're going to lose your sound. So what you do is you take your blue wire with the white stripe. It's power connection, whatever you want to call it, remote amp turn on. You only wire with the blue wire with the white stripe to all the blue wires on this harness. That way, no matter if you're on radio, CD, USB, all your devices are going to be powered up all the time, as long as the radio's turned on. So that's what that's for. So now what you need to do, because usually harnesses like these comes with the radio aren't like the factory harness. You got to just pull off little pieces. You have to actually strip them. So what you need to do is find the right size on your stripping tool here and cut off the same amount that was on the other harnesses. That way you won't have any wires sticking out past the butt connector. So I just stripped up the blue wire with the white stripes, and I got to find the blue wire. Like I said, there's only one wire on here, so slide this in, hold it, and strip it. Now these two are stuck together. So now you're going to go on and finish and do the rest of it. Like I said, if you have an illumination wire on here, just cap it off. All you got to do is just find the wire that you're not going to use, put a connector on it. Don't tape it off. Don't cut it down here. Something like that. You can still have a chance of shorting out somewhere. So just put a butt connector on it, and it'll be safe. All right. Let's see here. Sometimes these wires, the darker color wires, like the greens and purples, which is standard colors. If your wire doesn't have that, you may have the issue of connecting wires. The black stripe kind of blends in with the colors. You have to have some really good light to make sure you hook it over. Because if you get it backwards, it's probably going to put your speakers out of phase. So, sitting here talking away. After a while, all these wires start getting kind of like all up in the way and stuff. So you have to kind of work around what you've already done. All you gotta do is just match color for color. Make sure you strip the right amount, and make sure you find the right harness. There'll be several times you'll be wiring stuff up, and you might end up grabbing the wrong wire because probably just from the lack of good light, you may strip and connect the two different color wires together. All right, got a gray with a black stripe. There's a gray with a black stripe, and sometimes the grays look like greens. In bad lighting. Alright, here's just a solid gray. Connecting this. And probably if you're doing soldering, you'll probably still be on the first couple set of wires. Like I said, even though soldering is probably the best connection ever, it makes, you still have to get some shrink wrap or heat shrink to cover the wire, because when you solder it, you got all that exposed wire, and if you use tape unravels, and it shorts it out. So you have to use heat shrink, which means you have to heat that up, and it takes even longer. And then you gotta make sure all the heat shrink doesn't like melt all the way through. Then you have more problems that way. So if you're putting radios in, you're doing a lot of them. This is most probably the best way you want to do it. Like I said, don't cheat yourself by putting, because you'll end up having to do, double check later on. You probably have to, redo some connections and then start shorting wires, redo them. Alright, now I got everything connected. It probably would have took less time if I hadn't been chatting and stuff, but now, even then, even all of these wires are connected. There's some couples over here that you may not like I said, here's the other blue wire, and here's a brown wire. It's called mute, which I guess you can both hook it to some sort of thing on the radio on the harness if it had that. But usually the mute wire, you don't have to worry about it. It's already taped up with the tape from the factory, and it's cut off flat, so you don't have to worry about that shorting out. So now I got all these wires. They're still kind of jumbled up, as you can tell. It's still usable, but in order to ensure that your connectors still stay in position, this is where the wire ties come in handy. I usually, when I finish something like this, I usually grab 4 wire ties, cables, ties, whatever you want to call it, and then I go ahead and wire tie it up. I put one close to here just in case any of these wires are loose and want to pull out of the back of the harness of the factory plug. And then I put another one on the same side of here, but close up to the butt connectors. That way, if something wants to come out of here, it can't back out. So now I go to the other side, and I do the same thing for this plug. Get right up here at the close to it, so if anything wants to come out of this harness, it can't, because it's all nice and tight. And then I use one more and try to capture all the other wires that's capped off and close to the butt connectors as well. And then I'll take my end cutters, which is still on the same tool that I had. I'm not using Ken tools, and just cut off the excess. And now I have one harness that I've wired up that has a lot less chance of it falling apart, failing. All the connections are good and tight. You can probably pick up a car. Well, so I'm not going to try to do that, but it's all nice and tight. It's still bendable. Of course, now when you get to the other harnesses with the boxes and stuff, you have to find a place in the dash to put the box. But if you're wiring up radios and you do several of them, that's probably the right way to do it, because it's quick and fast. It'll save you less time, later on if something happens, because you use the correct harness. You got butt connectors. Everything's nice and wire tied. It'll be nice and neat, so when you pull the radio out, all you see is this and not, wires going everywhere. But anyway, that's how one way properly wire up a radio. I'm sure there's other ways you can probably think of, but this is the way we do it. This is the way I do it. I never had any problems with it, and it looks nice and neat, and it feels solid. Anyway, I've made a mess, and I've wired up a harness. I hope y'all learned something. This is Paul with 12 Volt Review. I appreciate y'all watching, and y'all have an awesome day, and please subscribe.